Today we're here with the legendary and the one and only Dr. Bernie Siegel. Dr. Bernie Siegel is a New York Times best-selling author, retired pediatric surgeon who speaks and writes on the relationship between the patient and the healing process. He is best known for his best-selling book, Love, Medicine, and Miracles, and has written a multitude of other books in the realm of self-help and healing. His latest book includes Love, Animals, and Miracles, and the Art of Healing. And today I have the distinct honor to speak with somebody that I've known for over a decade now, has been a great support for myself and for many others out there, and he's best referred to as Bernie. So Bernie, welcome to the Empower Hour.
Thank you very much, Doug.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you here. And, Bernie, there's been so many different things going on lately in our society, and we see it too. Our nation right now is in what we would consider chaos. And there's been a lot of anger displayed outwardly toward the recent police officer violence that have taken place and the tragedy that happened on Bastille Day in Nice, France. And after speaking with so many people about these recent events, many people are fearful to travel places, and many people are just in an angry state of mind. And how can we regain this sense of interconnectedness that we're one, this inner peace, and this return to love, frankly, when many people don't even really care to display those toward others out there, or maybe have the tools to do that? So could you speak to that to start off?
It's all about love. First of all, if somebody threatens you, tell them you love them. Now, that may sound crazy, but it worked in concentration camps and in life, that when you're on a line being sent to either a work camp or a gas chamber, and you walk up to a German guard who's deciding, and you say, "Ich liebe dich," this gentleman who said that to him was sent to the work camp, not to the gas chamber. Okay? Oh. And I don't make up any of these stories, just so people understand. A thief comes through the window into your kitchen. The elderly woman who lived in the apartment was there. She looked at him and said, "You look very thin. Sit down. I'll make something for you to eat." He ended up marrying one of the members of her family a few years later. And the key is to end the violence is to love the children. And I mean that literally. The opposite of love is not fear and hate. It's indifference, rejection, and abuse. A young man who was sexually abused by his parents and their friends, I was helping years ago when there was no treatment for AIDS. I was supporting him to sustain him emotionally. And he called me one day and said, "Dr. Siegel, what is it, Tony? I'm committing suicide." He said, "I'm going down to the subway to jump in front of the A train because I can't take it anymore." And I said, "Tony, why don't I help you get a gun and we'll kill your parents?" Now, what would you answer? What are most kids who you read about in the newspaper? They'd say, "Oh, good, get me a gun, I'll go kill them." But I was blown away by his answer. "No, I never want to be like them." His angel showed up and the train was late. So Tony called me later and I thought he was dead, but the phone rings. I said, "What happened?" He said, "The train didn't come." And I'm looking around the station. I saw the 800 number for suicide prevention. So I called them and they came and taught me about love.
And that right there, Bernie, is where you're talking about hitting at the youth. But, what are kids seeing nowadays? They're seeing dirty politics. They're seeing these things.
They're looking for revenge then. In other words, if they're abused by parents, don't feel loved, I'll get even. And then they go out and indiscriminately kill people. I was amazed. I put this on Facebook that Donald Trump has been married 3 times. Hillary, despite what her husband did, is still in that same marriage. So I said, as far as I'm concerned, she is better at relationships than he is, and maybe she'll make a better president. Well, oh my God, I didn't expect the whole world to, email me back, some agree with me, some tell me I'm crazy, you know what I mean? Everybody's got their own perspective.
Right.
But even there, it's so interesting to see. I put it on just to discuss relationships. But see, Joseph Campbell, in an article that he wrote, said marriage is an ordeal. And what a shock. The first time I read that, the jump off the page, it's an ordeal. But one night, my wife was asked, after I gave a lecture and we both performed, and she was amongst some women in the audience, they said to her, wow, what's it like to be married to him? And she said, it's a struggle. They looked at me like, whoa. But I nodded my head because I realized Campbell and my wife are saying the same thing. It takes work to create a relationship. See, it's not about a selfish response. What's good for me? It's what's good for the relationship. And that takes work. Yeah, that's why I felt that, I put this in. And then I said, if he's been married 3 times, maybe he isn't willing to work at it. And that would worry me if he's dealing with the head of some other country and says, no, I'm right, you're wrong, goodbye. And then we have a war, in a sense, another kind of divorce. But when somebody's willing to say, all right, sit down, let's see if we can work this out. What can we do? Then there's hope for it. If we don't grow up with a reverence for life, it's something Schweitzer talked about. And I find it in myself, because of how I was brought up, that literally, I often use this as a test question. When you're walking down the street and you see a worm on the road because there's been a heavy rain, what do? And the answer for me and for Schweitzer was, you pick it up and you put it back on the earth. Yeah. And believe me, you wouldn't believe how many worms I pick up when I walk the dog. And I used to think I was neurotic until I read what Schweitzer said. And boy, did I feel better getting therapy from him. Because he said, if you see the worm, if you see an insect in a puddle, he said, put a leaf in for it to climb on. And that's how our kids grew up, with a house full, well, like you mentioned the book, Love, Animals, and Miracles. I referred to the Siegel Zoo.
Right, you have a house of animals.
Our home, my being a doctor, 5 children, my wife loved animals too. Everybody gave us animals to take care of.
Right.
When they didn't want them anymore, or the veterinarians had some exotic pet somebody didn't want to deal with, they would call me and say, would you take this? And we filled our house and our yard with it. And it's interesting, nobody ever complained. In other words, the neighbors didn't say, look what they're doing. They have goats and geese and ducks in their yard. They have dogs running all over. And nobody ever reported us. And sometimes when I had to call the police and mention some crazy creature and say, if anybody calls and says, what they're seeing, it's ran away from our house, they never said you're not allowed to have that. I mean, this included skunks and other things that are now against the law, to have in your house.
Well, Bernie, you've talked about this too. I remember you were mentioning to me one time how even your son, I think it was Keith, or one of your sons got on the bus and the animals would actually follow. It was an imprinting mechanism.
Yeah, the school bus, the ducks, see, everything. See, that's why you talk about relationships. Yeah. Every creature that came out of an egg was hatched in an incubator. They thought their parents were our children. That's who they imprinted on. You hop out of an egg, who's standing there? Some kid. So when the school bus would pull up and they'd all get on it, they would try to get on it too.
Yes.
And the thing, you talk about relationships, when we would end up with so many ducks and geese, we took them to my folks' house who lived on a lake, and we'd release them there so they'd have a nice life. And my mother called after the first group was released and said, I have a question for you from the neighbors. What is it? Every time the school bus pulls up, the ducks and geese leave the lake and walk all the way up to the road. You're talking half a mile or more.
Well, there's that point right there, back taken, of that interconnectedness, whether we're humans to other creatures or humans to humans. Getting back to the point I was saying before, even whether it's politics or whether we're talking about racial issues, what is it that internally we're creating these issues between blacks and whites, Democrats and Republicans, when it's just an outer shell to really our inner spirit? So How do we get to this interconnectedness, Bernie?
We're all wounded, and that's the part we need to reveal. I get so tired of it. How are you today? Whether you're making a deposit at a drive-up window at the bank or going to get some, food at a local diner. How are you today? How's everything? Yeah. And boy, I give them why are you upsetting me? How's everything? Did you read the paper? I'm trying to eat a meal, and look what you're doing. And I really talk to them and say, look, tell people to have a nice day. You know, not how you doing? Because everybody lies and says fine, but it isn't fine. You know, and I'd say share your wounds. Because what I found was, for me, back in the 70s, I shaved my head. I learned it was to uncover spirituality like a monk. I mean, I learned that from Jung's writings, you know, but I had to do it. So I did it. I had no understanding why. But I was also stopped in the supermarket by a lady with a bandage over her eye, saying, you're the only person who hasn't asked me what happened. That impressed the hell out of me. See, she's wounded, everybody's talking to her. And that's what we need to realize. You know, don't hide your wounds, share them. Let's help each other. Thornton Wilder, in a story called The Pool at Bethesda, an angel comes there regularly. If you're lucky enough to be there at that moment and go into the water, the angel stirs the water, you're healed of all your afflictions. Well, the doctor has plenty of troubles, so he's going there almost every day trying to meet the angel. And one day, boom, you know, like I won the lottery. So he heads for the water. The angel steps in front of him while the other people go by and says, not you, you draw back. And the doctor says, what are you talking about? Just because I'm a doctor, I can't. And the angel says, no, it's not because you're a doctor, but without your wounds, where would your power be? It's your melancholy that makes your low voice tremble into the hearts of men. The very angels themselves cannot persuade the wretched and blundering children on earth as can one human being broken on the wheels of living. In love service, only the wounded soldier can serve. Draw back. See, and that's why that lady in Stop and Shop, or I went to the hospital with a shaved head, and people lined the hallway to talk to me. And I thought, what the hell's going on here? You know, these are not my patients. These are people who worked at the hospital, other doctors' patients. And I realized, dumbbell, it's because you shaved your head. They know you got something wrong. You're screwed up. So they can talk to you. And in the story, on the way home from the pool, the doctor realizes the truth from the angel's words, because doors fly open and he hears people yell, come in here, Dora only talks to you. She sits in the dark in her bedroom. Come in here, our son locked himself in the bathroom. He'll only come out if you're here. You know, and so he realizes it is his woundedness that makes him a healer. And that's the part we all have to learn. But what I put at our high school, this is a question third graders, fifth graders have no trouble with. If I had a picture of Barack Obama or me, and you can't tell which one of us it is, what is it a picture of?
A human being.
Well, he's black, I'm white.
Oh, a distinction between that, yeah, to the obvious sense. Yep.
So where are we all alike?
Inside.
Right. Yeah. And that's what the third graders and the fifth graders don't take time to think about.
Oh, yeah, right.
As soon as I say it to them, they all point at their chest. Our hearts is what they're telling us.
Yes.
So at our local high school, there's some big rocks in the front yard. I wrote love children on one, painted it on. And on the other one I wrote, we are all the same color inside.
Right.
And that's literally true. If I'm a surgeon, I don't have to worry what you're like inside.
No.
Yeah.
Well, I think much of the reason too, why people feel good or bad, right, is sort of a direct correlation with their level of happiness. And you were talking about being wounded. I think some people don't even know that they're wounded, but they hold this firm belief in themselves toward one opinion or another. And it's certainly good to have your opinion, but not to let in other things or to hold a grudge against someone else or some other group is just...
The words you hear when you're up to the age of 6 are hypnotic, literally, because of your brain patterns. But all the words you hear are hypnotic. I mean, these are quotes from adults. My mother's words were eating away at me and maybe gave me cancer. Well, it's not just cancer, but, when you're told you're inferior, ugly, a failure, you embarrass me. I mean, I know kids who were brought up and told by their parents to commit suicide. other kids whose parents committed suicide and they feel like failures. I mean, that's a quote again from a lady. My parents committed suicide when I was a child. I must have been a failure as a child. Now, that's the sickness of life. And as I say, we all have the opportunity to redo that process. Because here's the key. I'll tell you two stories, one about me, one about a school teacher. Because, all the authority figures in your life can reparent you. I mean, if politicians kept saying to people, we love you, instead of, let me fix the soda bottles so, there's less sugar in them, or put a sign on a box of cigarettes that it's not good for you, that doesn't stop people. But if they knew you loved them, then they'd say, hey, I'm worth loving. I should watch out and take care of myself. This one young lady wrote a little book about it called Purple. She was told in first grade that her drawing was not going to be hung on the wall with the other kids because she colored some tent purple, and tents aren't purple. It's a color for people who died. I mean, a teacher goes on ranting and raving. Second grade, she's asked to draw a picture. What do you do now? Think of the criticism you had. So she left her paper blank. The teacher came over. She's a wreck. What's he going to, yell at me and say? Well, he put his hand on her shoulder and said, the snowfall, how clean and white and beautiful. That saved her life. See?
Wow.
And that's why there are kids who are adults now who say, yeah, I remember my fourth grade teacher. Why? Because she made you feel like an important person. I had a phone call, so people know how to do this. When I got home one day, on their answering machine, it said, I want to be dead. Do you have Jack Kevorkian's phone number? I have a brain tumor. I've been sexually abused by my father. I want to be dead. I called her. I said, I don't have his number, but you're a child of God. Why do this to yourself? I love you. I'll become your father. Okay? Now, what did that mean? Somebody in my office at an earlier date said to me one day, a suicidal teenager, you're my CD. I said, what are you talking about? She said, you're my chosen dad. That's what I said to this young lady who wanted to be dead. I'll be your chosen dad. Now, she's alive today. We've met. Those are really the most loving, healing relationships for both of us. When you do this for someone and then they start sending you love. And then they start helping others, you see, because somebody has done that for them.
What do you say for people, Bernie, that can't, find that inner joy or happiness and have never heard it from anybody? And they're just they're out there living down on their luck, and they just feel like the world's out to get them, and they don't have that special.
I know. Even getting a pet, makes a difference. I mean, we have studies showing how dogs improve survival rate after heart attacks if you have a dog in your house versus you don't. And it also increases bonding hormones, the furry pets. So oxytocin, serotonin levels go up. So you're more likely to relate to people.
What are the best pets?
Well, the furry ones, the dogs and cats and things like that. Yeah. But again, humor enters into it. One of our daughter has lots of parrots and birds, and they speak English. They learn how to talk. And it caused trouble in her marriage because the parrot would yell her name or her husband's name. And then they'd start yelling at each other. Why are you bothering me all the time? What are you calling me for? It's not me, it's the parrot. And it was. They had to learn that if you hear somebody calling Carolyn, check whether it's the bird or your husband.
Right. Well, Bernie, I want to show you something here. This right here, and I want your opinion on, you talked about the power of love, you talked about the power of having a pet. How about the power of music?
Yes.
Listen to this sound first off, before I get your opinion on it. This is a vibratone, and this has a certain unique frequency. Tell me your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I would keep it slow. Well, I always say, why do we have 60 seconds in a minute? Who the hell decided on that?
Somebody to confuse us.
Have 100, around them. But when you listen to a clock, and it's true of your heartbeat, that, well-trained athletes have heart rates in the 60 range. And when you listen to a clock going tick, 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 it doesn't upset you. But if you were listening to tick, 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 you'd be more anxious and nervous. And I started years ago playing music in the operating room. For adults, yes, it was the kind of thing you're talking about. What was called classic, slow Baroque music. I mean, I'm not a musician, so I had to learn why a Pachelbel's canon helped everybody in the operating room relax, versus playing some rock music. It would have everybody jumping and agitated. With kids, you could play nursery rhymes, and they would relax and feel better. And that's been shown, as a matter of fact. The music you play during pregnancy has a relaxing effect on the child after it's born. I mean, these are all studies that have been done. So we hear in the uterus too. And that's, again, part of why a child comes out knowing I either got a loving environment or I'm in big trouble here. Because if the future parents are screaming at each other, fighting with each other, this kid, and it shows up on ultrasounds, is all agitated, moving around, frightened already. But the music in the operating room made a real difference for everybody and helped them relax. And I have to add some of the humor, because sometimes I'd be playing tapes and patients would say, "Is everything all right?" I say, "Why are you asking?" "Well, listen to the music. It was Frank Sinatra singing All of Me. Why not take all of me?" You're operating. And the other was Amazing Grace would come on. And they'd say, "Am I okay?" It's like, "Am I dying? Why are you playing that?" But, but you see, we'd all end up laughing, which also became very therapeutic. Cancer patients who laugh for no reason had a better survival rate than those who didn't laugh for no reason several times a day.
Yes, laughter is the medicine, they say,
Yeah.
the cure.
I always say the love and the laughter heals people. You can't be frightened in the midst of loving and laughing. And I mean that literally. When people were in the hospital, I would do lots of crazy childlike things to get them laughing about my crazy behavior.
They should have called you Dr. Cousins instead of Dr. Love.
Yeah, that too. And as I say, those are the things that people see you 5, 10, 15 years later and say, "Do you remember what you said to me in the hospital?" And they'll tell me this crazy thing I did. That's what they remember.
I recently watched a special on this, and they were showing how even when you're, quote, unconscious and under anesthesia, you still have brain activity going on, and it's pointed in certain areas of your brain.
Yeah.
So talk to us about consciousness.
Well, you hear under anesthesia, you hear in coma, and I was considered a nutcase years ago, because this was done, what I was doing was way before any research or anything else. And the anesthesiologist thought I was crazy talking to anesthetized people until they started waking up and talking about what I had said during surgery.
I mean, this is huge, because there's people out there that are literally in a vegetative state or seriously disabled, and people don't look at them as...
Give you an example how this helped. Because I just saw in the paper, I didn't read the article, that somebody's suing Yale Hospital because they wanted their family member to live, and Yale discontinued all the artificial mechanisms that were keeping this woman alive. In other words, they said she's brain dead. What's the point of keeping her alive? Now, the case that I always remember was a doctor, a young woman, said, "My mother is brain dead for 2 years. I want to pull out her feeding tube and let her die. But hospice won't accept her on that basis. They say I'm killing my mother." I said, "Look, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll pull the tube out. You just show up with no tube. And you can say that you didn't do it or anything." So I pulled the tube out, and they drove to hospice. The lawyer there showed up and said, "No, you're killing her. We won't accept her." I said, "Take her over to the hospital. I'll meet you there." I went over to the hospital. The family was standing around the mother's bed. Now, intravenous running, she's getting all her support. And I said to the woman, because the family burst into tears when I told them to say it, "Look, your family is here. They love you. Your love will stay with them. If you need to go, it's okay. Your love will stay with them." 15 minutes later, she died. Now, I know that works. It's not the only time I've done it, but when you read in the newspaper about the legal battle, that somebody wants to let their family member die and you're murdering them, and it just gets crazy.
Yeah.
When you have permission and you're not a failure if you die, then it's easy. You turn the switch off and you go. I mean, because I can tell you many stories about my in-laws who lived into their 90s and my folks. When they were ready to die, they never had any trouble. Matter of fact, my father-in-law, who was quadriplegic too, so he was a wonderful, inspiring man. I have to tell you his sense of humor, because he fell off his back porch when he got new glasses, which disoriented him, so he fell and injured his spinal cord. But I said to him, "What advice do you have for seniors?" He said, "Tell them to fall on something soft."
Right.
And then I came in to visit him again a couple of days later. He said, "What I told you doesn't always work." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "They stood me up in therapy. I toppled over on my wife and broke her legs. So tell them to just fall up."
Oh, no.
And that's on his headstone in the cemetery. Because the night, I wanted him to live to be 100 and get on television because he was such a wonderful teacher. But he quit at 97 because he's not going to do his son-in-law a favor, 3 more years. So we went in to feed him dinner and give him his supplements and all those things. And he just looked at us, his wife, his daughter, myself, and said, "No, no more. I'm done." And he died that night. And we all knew he's dying tonight, because there's no arguing or fighting. And the same was true. My father was in a coma, but because of stories my mother was telling, he died laughing. Now you say, how could he hear? But he looked so wonderful when he died, laughing at all these stories my mother was telling about their first meeting and, their first dates and all the things that went wrong. By the time my mother was done, I don't know why the two of them kept going out together. But that is all possible. And I would always share that with families, to never stop talking to the person. They are hearing you, even if they can't respond. And it's not just, when you say consciousness, persons, it's pets too.
Yes. Let me take a little moment here to share with the listeners. Again, we're speaking with Dr. Bernie Siegel, and we're having a great conversation too about really talking with others, being in this positive state of love. So I would like to take this opportunity to share with the listeners to let you know a little bit personally what I know about Bernie that you may not. And I reached out to Bernie about, I'd say 11 or 12 years ago, and I asked if I can attend one of his group sessions that he had run for patients with cancer and out in Connecticut. And I just couldn't believe it. I mean, Bernie, you were so gracious to allow me to come there and really shadow what you do. And the outpouring of people that even just continuing through the session that was coming through the door was incredible. What I learned from you, and I noticed, is that you allow people to give themselves permission to express themselves without judgment and begin the process of healing from within. And from that point, you were so nice. You said you invited me back again. And I came back, I think it was like probably 6 months later, to another session. And I remember you introducing me and I was certainly not qualified at that time to be called a spiritual leader. But you said, we have a special guest here. He's a spiritual leader. And at that point I thought, wow, what allows me to become a spiritual leader? But I vividly recall you saying something to me when I said, how do you do it with these people? I mean, let me tell you, listeners, Bernie does not give them a magic pill. It's not like, even though it's a good pill, coenzyme Q10. There it is. That'll solve your problem. That'll cure cancer. No. It's his unconditional love and acceptance. And to me, everyone that walked through that door and left that night had a big smile on their face and a feeling of hope. And that day was really a switch that turned on for me. And I just opened up my heart to every person and without judgment, asked them about their story and offered them love and acceptance. And Bernie, what I learned is love has no boundaries. And
Right.
From this story, my question to you is this. How do people find the love within themselves, again, when they're not receiving it from others, or again, they're receiving these fear-based, hate-ridden messages every single day?
What I found was that by my loving them, no matter how they behaved or what they did, eventually they realized they were worth something and began to take care of themselves. You see, think about it as a doctor. It's easier to describe that way. A patient comes in, they've got a problem, you tell them what they need to do, what medications they take, and they don't. So what do you do after a few months? There's no point in your coming back. Okay, you're just like my parents. You're throwing me out again, you know. But I would always say, hey, let me give you a hug and I'll see you in 2 weeks. And after a while, I knew they were looking at me saying, why the hell do you keep telling me to come back? You know, I'm not doing anything. And that's when they began to change, because their thought was, he must care about me. I must be worth something. And that's why I call it the reparenting, you know, that CD line, the chosen dad, that you become an authority figure who cares about them. And that's when they realize they have some worthiness. I mean, let me tell you, even one of our children, I mean, he drove us nuts. See, that's a way of getting attention, too. I mean it. There's some people who enjoy being sick because that's how they get attention, whereas if they weren't sick, nobody would love them or take care of them.
Bernie, I think I know, listeners out there, I'm holding one of Bernie's books, the 365 Prescriptions for the Soul.
And I love that book myself.
Yes, and I remember in here, it's the one, Kids, Devils, or Angels. It's on page 104. And the one you talked about, your son, I think it was Jeffrey, and how his room was closer. And then Keith said, hey, Dad, there's 5 kids. You need to split us up 20% each. And then you said, well, Keith, I can't because your brother's driving me crazy. He's getting 40%.
That's right.
And I remember that. And oh, my goodness. And so at that point in that whole discussion, your lesson was to pay really close attention to how your actions are perceived by your kids.
Yeah.
So with all the violence...
See, to let them know that they're loved.
To love,
because
right.
The point I make is Keith's bedroom is at the end of the hall.
Yes.
See, with 5 kids. And Jeffrey's bedroom is off the kitchen, so we know what he's doing all the time.
Right.
But you see, you could be at the end of the hall and say, they don't love me, look where they put me. But I was very impressed by Keith because he came up and said, you don't love me. He didn't sit in his bedroom and say, they don't love me. He made noise about it. See, that was healthy. And then he got the right story. But let me say this, because why the love overpowers eventually. Jeffrey sent, I think it was about a year ago, I have it in my computer, an email. It said, I want you to know this in case something were to happen to me and I couldn't say it to you and Mom. I want to thank you for your love and all the things you did for me. And I always say, that's winning the lottery of life. I mean, he calls us every night now to ask how we're doing. You know, I mean, he knows that no matter what he behaved like, we loved him. And we never gave up on him. He drove one psychiatrist I took him to, a child psychiatrist. He said, don't bother to bring him. I said, why not? He said, because he sits there for an hour staring at me and doesn't say a word. And then he writes a nasty message in the velveteen sofa. He said, I've never had anybody have the courage to do that. So he'll make it. He'll be okay. And I always said, that saved me a fortune, you know.
Right.
But, you know, it's the kind of kid, you see, who had the courage and fought back when he didn't have what he liked to do. Mm-hmm. He needed to have his independence in life. And when he got it, then he thanked us for it.
Well, that's the most rewarding thing you can possibly imagine. And it shows the fruit of your labor. Now, how about this with all, again, the things going on in our society, things kids are seeing, violence in the media, messages given in the political arena. Is this affecting today's children? If so, in what manner, and how can we prevent that before they get wounded? Because you talk a lot about woundedness, and how do we prevent that in children when they're getting a lot of negative messages?
Relationships. You know, when you see all these people, you know, with devices. See, I have a crazy sense of humor, because even in Stop and Shop, where I always say I go for therapy, because I act as if I know every person there. Because I know they've all got their problems. But coming down the aisle the other day was a woman with a cell phone, you know. I said to her, excuse me, do you know it's against the law to drive and be on the phone at the same time? Now, she's just pushing the shopping cart. But, you know, I let her know you could have crashed into me. But, you know, but she laughs, and she and I are friends at that moment because of what I just said to her. You know, and that's the part. We've got to separate the kids from mechanical objects and, you know, have them caring. That's the other part that would do it. They need to care for something. And believe me, again, with lots of studies and tests, you could say to one of your kids, there's a plant in the living room that I want you to take care of. See that it's watered and fertilized. And even then, that kid will be more in touch with life than the kid who has no relationships. And again, all these things had studies done. So whether it's other living things, let me put it that way. It doesn't have to be a pet in your house, but that it's your child is related to some other living thing. Let me give you another example. One of our kids is in the FBI. And I didn't know this till he graduated, when it said, if you're going to be accepted, you have to be capable of killing someone. They are asked, are you capable of killing someone? If they say no, then they say, well, we can't accept you into the FBI Academy. When I heard that, I thought, wow. But I know what he's thinking is, he's not going to go out in the street and kill people. He's trying to save lives. He sent me an email, too, one day. I was at some classes down in Virginia, where the FBI school is, and he said, I went out at a break, and there was a turtle in the street. So I picked it up, and I spent half an hour finding a pond to let it go in. Now, would you worry about that guy having a gun? I mean, if he spends half an hour saving the life of a turtle, I mean, he's not going to use it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the part. And I may add, this is an important aspect. Why do you want to be a doctor? I'm fascinated by the human body. Excuse me, people come in the body. Why do you want to be a veterinarian? I love animals. People bring them in. Why do you want to be a policeman? I want to help people. But yes, if you care about people, fine. But if you want to have power, see, I want to have a gun. I want to protect people. You can be a doctor for the wrong reasons. Look at where Kevorkian ended up in jail, killing people instead of running a hospice, okay? The police want power and safety, but I was again reading in the paper today, some cop said, when you're in a tough position and you're frightened, what's the first thing you think of? To pull out your gun and kill somebody. But again, if you're a policeman to make life better for everybody, you're less likely to pull your gun out and kill somebody. I've seen it when I've been stopped for speeding, and he said, let me have your driver's license, and I opened the door of my car, and the cop was, where are you going? What are you doing? I said, my wallet's in my back pocket. I can't get it out if I'm not standing up. Oh, all right. But boy, the way he reacted, just because I'm opening the car door.
Yes.
All that fear.
So exactly.
You have to analyze everyone who goes into every profession. And I mean it thoroughly. So you're using it for the right reasons and understanding yourself and not becoming a cop or psychiatrist or doctor or plumber for the wrong reasons.
Well, you're exactly right, and I think you encapsulate it in one of your earlier books, in addition to a book that I highly recommend out there, listeners to get, the 365 Prescriptions, one a day for a year. They make the world of difference. They're funny, they're humorous, and they're real. And then
I have to say, let me mention this about consciousness.
Okay.
I read the 365 book. It's still sitting on my desk. I can hold it up for you.
Yeah.
But what amazes me is I don't remember writing it. Here's my copy, okay? But when I read it, I think, did I write that? Wow, that's really helpful and clever.
I can
and
say it came
it's coming, I know, from another place.
That's right.
I looked at was called the sled dog, where think of your heart. That the sled dog knows where the sled should go and makes the decisions. And I was always saying, let your heart make up your mind. And then I was reading, make your heart your sled dog. And I thought, wow, where did that come from? I wrote that.
I know. Well, I remember the one on endangered species you talked about. And you said, and the mind goes out to thinking about animals out there. But what about us?
Yeah.
All right, so let's get to this one. Peace, Love, and Healing. This has been on the New York Times bestseller for a long time. And really, look at those three words. Peace.
That's how I used to sign all my letters.
Me too. Peace. Yeah.
I have a newspaper column that I sign that way. It's like a letter to everyone.
Yes.
And let me mention that when we're done. But I would when I write somebody a letter, what do I wish for them? Peace, love, and healing. And if that comes into somebody's life, you've got everything you need.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the letter to everyone, for everybody to think this way. One of my favorite authors is William Saroyan. And a book that I didn't write, The Human Comedy, I would tell everybody to read that. It's about life and people, And anyway, in one of his stories, a writer has somebody helping him. And when his assistant comes in, he says, you're a good writer too. And the young man says, what are you talking about? I've never written anything. Oh, that letter on your desk. He said, that's just a letter to my father. What are you talking about? He said, okay, then write a letter to everyone. See? That's what we all need to do. Write a letter to everyone. Then you're sharing your life, yourself.
Well, that's it right there.
Share everything. Let me add this, because I had a journal, like writing to myself, because I was burying all my pain as a physician, because you're not trained to deal with what happens when you become a doctor and can't cure patients and wonder why God did this to people. But my wife said to me, there's nothing funny in your journal. Because I forgot to hide it one night and she found it. I said, honey, my life isn't funny. What are you talking about? And then she told me jokes about crazy things that happened in the hospital that I would tell her and the kids at the dinner table the night before. But I never put a single joke into my journal. And boy, my wife gave me a good tap on the head to say, why don't you put the funny things in there too?
Exactly.
And then I began to pay attention to them also as a part of my life, not just the tragedies. But I have to say, it's hard to let go. I mean, I have memories still about operations I performed on people 30 and 40 years ago where things went wrong, and I'm still, feeling them. And I don't mean, I always say it's not about malpractice, but people die, things happen. And,
you're a caring guy.
Hospital, they don't have a grieving session for doctors,
Maybe
so
they need one.
Yeah, and let me add this. There are many stories I've written about where doctors said, I had to cry in the stairway. I cried in the bathroom, the men's room, because they were embarrassed to show emotions in front of other people in the hospital. And that never bothered me. I learned that if I'm tearful or sad, I can ask for a hug too. As a matter of fact, I apologized to my patients when I realized I was saying to them, I need to hug you. The first two words were I need, see, not you need a hug. And that was when they were going through difficulties. And then I said, I just realized I had a problem. I needed you to hug me. I want to apologize. And they all said, we knew you needed it. You don't have to apologize. It was okay.
Yeah.
We wanted to help you. Yeah.
Now, would you say this book is also beneficial for doctors out there?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I often said to patients, if you see one of my first few books in the bookcase in your doctor's office, that's a good doctor. And I'm not talking about my ego, but it's doctors who are criticized by patients, family, and nurses are the best doctors because they're learning from their mistakes.
Yes.
The patients aren't afraid to say, the way you spoke to me last time really upset me. And if the doctor says, I'm sorry, then they just learned something. But if the doctor said, oh, you're the only patient who's ever complained, then get a new doctor. Because they're not willing to accept that anything is wrong with them or they could have made a mistake. And the nurses taught me that. They said, look, we tell you when you do something that could be done in a better way. Because I thought I said to one, I'm the worst doctor in the hospital, right? She said, what are you talking about? I said, you always tell me when I'm doing wrong. She said, yeah, because you listen and you care. If the doctors don't listen, we don't talk to them. But we know you listen, so we tell you. And that helped me a lot.
Yes.
Because I can understand why, even our kids used to say to me, Dad, what is it? You're not in the operating room now. So if I became overbearing, that was their line, and it cooled me right down.
Yeah. Well, for people that don't know Dr. Bernie Siegel, he's been around for many decades. He's a world-renowned pediatric surgeon and somebody who's really specializes in patient empowerment. when I was a little kid, Bernie, I saw you on the Oprah Winfrey Show many times.
Yes.
And I recall, I mean, and my mother would watch as well. And what an inspiration and what a unique perspective at that time. And still today, we're not at the point we need to be, but you really brought to life this whole mind, body, spirit connection.
Yeah.
So now, where does animals come in? The power of healing with animals. When did you start discovering
Oh,
that?
that's it. The relationship is one thing. See, women with the same cancers as men live longer. Married men live longer than single men. Smoke is the same amount, have fewer cases of lung cancer. And again, most doctors are thinking, well, the hormones must be protecting the women. Then my comment was, well, then sleeping with them is protecting the men, because they're not seeing that it's a relationship. I mean, a sentence in some article I was reading said, doctors are trained to treat the result, not the cause. And one ad in a medical journal that they canceled because I wrote to them said, I'm depressed, unable to cope. I went to see my physician. He prescribed an antidepressant. I feel better now. I wrote to the pharmaceutical company, New England Journal of Medicine. I said, excuse me, I've had a tragedy in my family. I go to my doctor. All I get is a pill. Don't you think the doctor ought to say, what's happening? Why are you feeling this way? And they canceled the ad. But you see, and here's from Carl Jung 100 years ago. I mean, what doctors aren't told about. He said, the key thing is the story. See, the diagnosis may help the doctor, but it doesn't help the patient. There, the key thing is the story. For it alone shows human background and human suffering, and only at that point can the doctor's therapy begin to operate. So I can tell you, I had more support from psychiatrists and psychologists. See, when I sent them articles of mine, they said, yeah, this is appropriate for our journal, but it's not interesting. When I sent it to medical journals, it came back saying, it's interesting, but it's not appropriate. So what medicine is trained to do is treat people like a car or a house. See? You have a plumbing problem, you don't call an electrician, you call the plumber. But the human body, yeah, if you have a heart problem, you can see a cardiologist. But your heart is affected by your mind, your feelings, your activity. It's not a separate part of your body, the way the plumbing may be in a house. So, yeah, if you've got a blocked pipe, a plumber can fix it. But if you've got a blocked artery, you have to also look at why on Monday morning do we have more heart attacks, strokes, suicides, and illnesses?
Perception. Yeah, it's
Right.
it's a perception. So you've talked about this connection between mind and body and how the power of the mind, your thoughts can transcend obstacles and transcend your life and transform your life. In your opinion, no matter if you have a physical ailment or not, or if you're from a broken relationship or not, my question to you is twofold. What is the most empowering thought and what is the most destructive thought that a person can have, Bernie? If you had to choose one.
I was criticized. You mentioned Oprah Winfrey. She never used to tell me this, but she would invite me and then have people there to criticize me.
Oh.
Like other doctors, so it would make the program more exciting.
Yes.
Now, I knew she agreed with me. I mean, her head would be nodding.
Yes.
But it was a much better show.
Right. Yeah.
And then I was criticized by doctors for blaming my patients. Now, what did that mean? It meant I asked them, what's going on in your life? To point out to them why they could be sick at this moment. That it's not a random event. Then I read this as a quote from Jesus, from Ernest Holmes in one of his articles. He's from Science of Mind. It is done unto you as you believe. Okay? Now I thought, well, Jesus, what a problem he's creating. So if I get sick, Jesus is telling me it's my fault.
It's your beliefs.
Yeah, you see, but obviously I'm teasing when I say it that way.
Right.
But what Jesus is pointing out to you is what's going on in your mind, in your head, in your life has a lot to do with then what happens to you. Now, it does get distorted in religion by some clergy. See, does God want me to have cancer? Billy Graham answered, not necessarily. I thought, what are you talking about? Why didn't you say no? Because he said sometimes God might use cancer to bring you back to church. See, everything's going well in your life, you don't show up on Sunday. And then you get cancer, you show up. That disturbed me. Because what Maimonides said, well, first let me mention what the Pope said many years ago, about almost 200 years ago. Smallpox vaccination came out. And that's why I love this Pope. I mean, he has such a different attitude about religion and life. But Pope Leo XII, 1832, I think it was, smallpox vaccination is available. So what do you think the Pope said to everybody? Go, stay healthy.
Yeah.
No, he said God decides who gets smallpox. If you vaccinate yourself against smallpox, you're not going to heaven, you're not a child of God anymore. When I read that in books on, religion and health, I thought, oh my God. But that's where you see where the guilt, shame, and blame comes in. What I loved is what Maimonides wrote and said. Two things. First, if people took as good care of themselves as they do their animals, they'd suffer fewer illnesses. And the other was, disease is a loss of health. It's not God punishing you. You've lost something. So if you lose it, help your neighbor find it if they lost their health. And if you lose yours, help yourself and seek help finding it.
I take it from what you're saying. So in terms of an empowering thought, it's really just your thinking in essence, and your most destructive thought is your thinking. So
I use the word potential. Okay. Because you don't know what could happen. What's built into us by our Creator is survival mechanisms. I have to repeat somewhere in one of Ernest Holmes' books, and I'm looking for it again, I swear he had the sentence, what if Jesus was the only normal person who ever lived? I loved it. But I have seen that happen, where people have such profound faith that they stop treatment because of how they're feeling and I'm going to go home and die.
Yeah.
But as the woman said, I went home and I left my troubles to God, and her cancer disappeared.
Surrendering.
So there is a term that Solzhenitsyn uses that doctors don't, self-induced healing. Doctors talk about spontaneous remissions. Well then, what do you learn from it? Nothing, it's spontaneous, it's luck. No, it isn't. The rainbow-colored butterfly is the symbol that Solzhenitsyn uses, fluttering out of the book that one of the guys is reading on the ward about self-induced healing. You get your life in order, the rainbow. The butterfly is a symbol of transformation. That's how you get your life in order. See? They tell you you have a few months to live, you go home, transform your life, and you notice something. I'm not dead. I have to tell you, this was a phone call. This man, we expected to die in a couple of months, and he went to Colorado to die in the mountains, in the beauty of the mountains. I got no call to come to the funeral, so I called up because I was angry at the family for ignoring my desire to attend his funeral. But he answered the phone, and he said, it was so beautiful here, I forgot to die. Now, I have letters from people saying,
going to Colorado, Bernie.
I'm so busy now, she's wearing herself out instead of dying. Because she said, I thought the doctor was right. So I went home and she did all these wonderful things. And she said, now I'm so busy, I'm killing myself. Help, where do I go from here? But let me say this, there are people in Colorado who have no idea why it helped him to come there. See, those are people I say, why don't you move to Florida? That's why you get back to following your heart, your sled dog,
Exactly.
And pay attention to what makes you happy.
Right. Now, Bernie, as we're rounding out the Empower Hour here, I want to ask you an important question I ask all my guests. What do you feel is your greatest Empower moment? It could be something or someone who inspired you to become who you are today, all the work you've done.
Easy to answer.
Yes.
The term I use is I've done something real at last. Okay?
What inspired you, though? What empowered you?
It means helping other people.
But what inspired you to become that is the question.
I think how I was brought up.
Yeah. Okay.
To love people.
Yes.
And to feel comfortable with myself, so I wasn't worrying about being judged. So you see, I could be on Oprah Winfrey and not worried what other doctors would say or people would say. And my wife loved me, so she gave me permission. My parents loved me. Yeah, they thought I was nuts, but they saw I was helping people. So 2 times, you see. One, the first book, Love, Medicine, and Miracles, became #1 New York Times bestseller, nonfiction. I walked out of the house that morning, looked up at the sky, and I said, I've done something real at last. I've helped millions of people. And that book is still in print, still being published.
Yeah.
Got it like 30 years later at least.
Mm-hmm.
The other was, which made it clear, because I was reading a story to our kids, and then I realized, oh my God, I wrote this. Because it was I never throw anything out, so our house is like a museum. So I found this magazine with this wonderful story about doing something real. And I'm reading it to our kids, and then I realized, it's you. What's it about? You go out camping in the middle of nowhere. One of the people who shows up, this is a group who came on a trip, is pregnant. And I said to her, it's not a good idea to be out here. She said, oh, I'm not due for a month or so. I can, fine. 2 days later, she goes into labor. And I'm the only doctor there, so they're knocking on our tent. Hey, Dr. Siegel, will you come? So I go over to help her. She delivers, and the baby is not breathing. Turned cyanotic. Working on, massaging the heart, breathing for it, and I can't get anything going. So I handed it back to the mother. I said, put it against your breast. Sometimes kids will wake up doing that. And she held it, nothing happened. And she looked up at me, because I reached for the kid again. She said, look, it's okay. If the child dies, it dies. I can handle it. I said, no, I can't quit. And I started working on the kid again. And lo and behold, the little guy takes a breath, pinks up, comes back to life. So I handed her back to her.
Wow.
You walk outside, look up at the sky and say, hey, God, I've done something real at last. So what to me makes a difference? Yeah. It doesn't have to be saving a life, if you know what I mean, but you're changing a life.
Yes.
You're helping somebody else have a better life. And those are the greatest gifts to me, whether it's an email or a note or something else saying, thank you. See, you become a life coach. Let's put it in those words. I always say, be a love warrior, look for life coaches. So coach people. You're improving them, but you're not saying you're a bum and a failure, you're doing it wrong. Like a coach, you walk up and say, hey, there's a better way of doing this. Let me show you. Let me demonstrate.
And parents out there listening, it's a very important thing to understand. And when you're dealing with your children, you're dealing with the next generation and bringing them up. And Bernie made a very good point. He said, why he got to where he was in large part was because he felt not judged. He felt unconditionally loved by his parents, and in turn gave to his children, his wife.
You mentioned, I grew up with these 3 mottos to give your kids. Do what makes you happy. In other words, when your kid says, what the heck am I supposed to do now? Do what makes you happy. I had a horrible day at school. God is redirecting you. Something good will come of this. My mother, I have to tell you, as a kid, I thought my mother was no help. Do what makes you happy, and God is redirecting you. Ma.
Right.
So, but she taught me, you don't know the future. Let's see what develops. So my father's father died of tuberculosis, leaving 6 children and a wife with no insurance.
Wow.
He said, blew my mind to hear him say this one day. The best thing that ever happened to me was my father dying when I was 12 years old. I said, what are you talking about? He said, it taught me what's important about life. So he was always helping other people.
Yes.
Because he said, material things are to make the world better for other people, not just yourself. So, whether you're lending money or doing a favor, but I grew up with those, what I call 3 mottos to live by. And believe me, I meet people who say, excuse me, you didn't ask me what mottos I'm dying by. What their parents said to them.
Yes. And Bernie, to round out the program today, how can people looking to empower themselves learn more about you and your work and possibly even get in touch with you?
Yeah, it's not just me and my work, but everybody's writing books. When? After they have a disaster. Okay? And their lives are threatened. The house burns down, whatever the hell it is. And then they say, oh, I've learned about surviving. So I'll write a book to help other people. The books have all been written for the last few thousand years. So go and read what other people have written about surviving. Then you'll have the tools. And I mean it, from the Bible, because I was called satanic and occult once by a minister, because you're using meditation and Satan can take over the images. It's incredible what you start hearing. I said to him, I'll give my whole lecture based on quotes from Jesus Christ. And he said, well, maybe you're not as bad as I thought you were, if you know who he is. It was nuts. But you see, the messages are there. All those quotes are helping you to survive and to realize that you are a child of God. I always say, when you get to heaven, how do you introduce yourself to God? If you don't say your child is here, God says, come back when you know who you are. See? Because if you say, I'm a doctor, you know, God isn't impressed. Come back when you know who you are. So accept that, and that what's built into you are all these survival mechanisms. If you cut your finger, you don't bleed to death. Who figured that out? And even the bacteria resist antibiotics. So all organisms and all of life is meant to be here to, well, somebody wrote me and said, write an article on the meaning of life. What's the last sentence? Basically, we're all here to make God happy. See, to make our Creator happy. Because creation comes out of loving, intelligent, conscious energy. And I mean that literally. We didn't get into it, but I learned that we can communicate with animals through our consciousness. You talk to them in your head, they know what you're talking about. I mean, my friend Amelia Kincaid, just a very short story, while in California and Africa, told me where to find lost pets in Connecticut. And she's seeing through their eyes and knowing what's in their head. So she taught me, again, the symbolism of the still pond. Ugly duckling sees he's a swan. Tiger raised by goats sees he's a tiger. See, both of them, when they look into the still pond. So you want to change your life, quiet your mind like a still pond. Then you see the truth. But when you grow up with, you're a mess, you're ugly, you're this, you're that, then you're in a turbulent environment and you never see that you are a child of God and a beautiful creation.
Bernie, on that note right there, that's going to conclude our show. And I thank you so much for coming on and really giving empowering words of wisdom, great, real, truthful, genuine stories to help lift us up. And thank you very much.
Okay. One, it's always hard for me. I never stop talking. This was somebody who had polio as a child, developed Lou Gehrig's disease as an adult. Her body's fading away. She's dying, of paralysis. Said, I didn't want to die hating my body. Because as a kid, she hated her body because of the polio. She said, I sat naked in front of the mirror, loving my body. An inch at a time, really. I mean, it's incredible to listen to what she told me. My toes, my foot, my ankle, my knees. And guess what? She's alive today.
Well,
sitting naked, loving herself.
Ladies and gentlemen out there, today is the first day out of all days to love yourself. And love yourself from top to bottom, unconditionally. And as Bernie said, live in the present moment. And you'll feel that you've made a difference for yourself and for others. Again, thank you, Bernie, for being on the show.
Love your life and body and things happen. Thanks.
Thank you.